Good resolution. Okay. Nice. Okay. Yeah. So my name's Dave. Thanks for inviting me. Honor to be here. Disclaimer. Yeah. This talk that I'm about to give now, it's actually what I'm going to be giving at Apex as well in a month or so. So anyone who's there as well.
Speak up a bit.
Anyone who's there as well, you'll see this again at some point in the future. So yeah, my name's Dave, co-founder of a company called Dali, and I'm going to be talking about a little less decentralization, a little more transaction. No Elvis Presley costume. So I'll talk about what it is that Dali does. I'll talk about why I think that we're doing what we're doing, and I'll talk about how we're doing it. So when I speak to people, often people who have no awareness of blockchain, the way that I describe Dali is we're a payments company for API providers. So we basically just make it easier for API providers to accept payments for usage of their APIs. And I like to think that we make API payments basically work the way that they should work in some sense. So what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? So this is what I often think about the old-fashioned approach to API payments. So you've got a user, bottom left. You've got a service, top right. I've labeled this as ChatGPT. That's quite a common API that gets used these days. And the user, they typically have to go through multiple steps to access and pay for the API. So initially, they're going to register. They're going to hand over some details, maybe click a few checkboxes. They'll then move on to step 2. This is where they're actually going to make the payment. So they're going to typically subscribe. They're going to commit to a month at least of paying for the service, sometimes more. And then they're going to receive an API key after they've subscribed. And the API key is the thing that's going to allow them to get past this authentication layer. And they're going to be able to access the API. So what we do at Dali is we basically bring the payment and the usage of the API together, basically into a single unit. And so yeah, we embed payments directly into requests. So this is what I think that API payments maybe done more right looks like. So you've got a client, left-hand side again, ChatGPT, some sort of API on the right-hand side. And when the client wants to use the API, he just pays. He just embeds a payment directly into the request header. There's this authentication by payment layer responsible for checking that the request is funded, and it's allowed to go through if it's funded. So some trivia. So I think that the internet designers, it's fair to say that they saw embedded payments into requests coming. We can see this from actually an earlier, well, it's actually an original HTTP internet standard, and in this specification they actually reserve 402 error codes for payment required. Yeah, I don't know what that's. Is it?
I'll just kill the audio. No, it's not the audio. I think it's the from the cable.
Yeah. See if that fixes it. Yeah. So yeah, I think internet designers they saw embedded payments coming. You can see this from an original internet standard specification where they'd reserved a 402 error code for payment required, and this still hasn't really taken off. The usage of this error code it's still designated for reserved for future use. And I think the reason for that is payment rails, they just haven't kept pace with modern internet technology. So one of the things that we're doing at Dali is we're always firing these things. We're constantly getting spammed with unfunded requests, and yeah, we're always giving them this response, 402 error response. And they don't give up. So yeah, if we're interested in embedding payments directly into requests, probably want to understand how many API calls are taking place globally on a daily basis. And so the answer is trillions. So yeah, there are trillions of requests happening on a daily basis. So if you compare this to XRPL or Zahao, these things, I think, at a push, are running at maybe 100 million transactions a day. This is based on a figure that's often thrown around of 1,500 transactions a second. May be true, may not be true, I don't know. But you quickly conclude that single API payments on-chain is not going to work. It's way too inefficient. There's like 4 orders of magnitude difference between those two numbers that I just mentioned. So another way that I describe what it is that DALI does to people who are maybe a little bit more clued up on blockchain is we're effectively a hub for off-chain API payments. So yeah, this is what we look like as a diagram to some extent. So we've got API users on the left-hand side. We've got API providers on the right-hand side. And the users, these guys, they want to access the APIs of the API providers, and rather than going directly, they go via DALI. They just embed a payment into the request header. DALI checks the payment, makes sure it's good, and it forwards the request if it's good, and returns the response back to the user. And so we accumulate off-chain payments over a 24-hour period, and then we settle on-chain after 24 hours. So the API providers, effectively trust us to pay them at the end of the day. So that's one feature of DALI. Yeah, nightly payouts, and yeah, I'm thinking about not having it nightly in the future because yeah, when things go wrong nightly, you're in bed. You can't fix them. But no, it's been pretty good so far. And so this is the user experience. So
sorry, can you pull out the other end from the wall? It's not that. Okay, so that's fine. Some interference.
Yeah, sorry, it's not me. So yeah, this is the user experience that an API user is going to go through when they're accessing an API through DALI. So they're going to create an off-chain transaction. We have this client, pay.dali.io. I effectively think of it as it's a payment channel manager, sort of. It allows people to create payment channels, top up payment channels, create claims against those payment channels. And so when you create a claim against a payment channel, you basically just receive a base64 encoded JSON, it's just a string of characters. A feature, I guess, of the off-chain payment is, and this is something that I've had to explain to people quite a few times, if you lose it, it's fine. It hasn't settled on chain, so you can just if you lose your off-chain payment, if you lose your payment claim, just create another. It's fine. Yeah. So they've got their off-chain payment. They're then going to embed the payment into a request. So this is how they're going to do that. They define a header payment claim, embed the string into the header, and that's effectively it. They're gonna route their request through us. So if they were accessing xrplcluster.com, for example, they're going to change the base URL xrplcluster.com to xrplcluster.dali.io. And then everything else just stays the same. So all of the subsequent paths, all the query strings, all the body of the request, identical. Say it again.
Add-on headers.
Add-on headers, yeah, exactly. We forward headers as well. So yeah, missing some information here, that's right. So DALI just forwards it all and gives the user what XRPL cluster would have given the user. Okay, so these are some of the people that we're working with from the ecosystem. Some of these guys are API users. Some of these guys are API providers. Most of those are sitting in this room, I think, right now. Some of these guys are wallets as well, so we support a few wallets. And yeah, we've got these, I guess, these are the chains that we're supporting in the center. So yeah, we support XRPL, we support Zahao. I guess one interesting fact about these chains is XRPL only supports off-chain payments with XRP. Zahao supports off-chain payments with any issued token. And actually, yeah, that is not achieved through hooks. That's like an amendment change that's allowed that to happen. Okay, so I like to think about the future of AI agents and how these things are going to take over the world. And one of the things that I think about is the fact that agents, they're going to need access to data on demand in real time, and with a system like DALI, they'd be able to access that data, to be able to pay for it in real time. They wouldn't be, held up by subscriptions and having to subscribe. They could just pay for what they want when they want it. So here's a demo, and I'm gonna have to plug this in. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Make sure you change the audio output to
line out. It's on the screens, so you have to change it to make sense.
To the. Let's see if it works.
And yeah, let's see if hopefully this is. Yep, nice.
You can increase your volume.
Yeah. Annoyingly, I've got this thing in the way. Let's see if it's.
Here's how we gave a custom GPT the ability to pay for real-time API requests. We just need to add an action by clicking here. We give the GPT an open API spec which defines BitHump's DALI-linked API for the GPT. To allow it to pay for the API, we just give it the custom payment claim header. Let's go to DALI and create a payment claim. We'll add the payment claim as the key. That's it. Let's update the GPT. Now our GPT can get high-rate access to BitHump's API. Let's get some AMM info. The GPT just paid BitHump 0.0005 XRP for this information. Let's ask another question. Again, BitHump just got paid another 0.0005 XRP for this information.
Yeah, exactly. But
That's amazing.
yeah, so that was a demo that I made. It was pretty much immediately after Apex. I heard David Schwartz talk about the intersection of AI and blockchain. He sort of mentioned something that sounded like this, and so I went away and made the demo. And yeah, BitHump, those guys, they earned some money.
Lunch is on BitHump.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So, a common question that I get asked by people is, aren't subscriptions better? Everyone knows subscriptions are better, right? Businesses prefer them. And I think it's a nuanced question. It depends on a bunch of context, as most things do in life. So one of the things that I think you've got to consider is, if you're a user, when you're getting a subscription, you're by definition, you're fixing your costs on a monthly basis typically. And so if you've got really variable usage of the API, there's probably something wrong there. You're probably doing something a little bit inefficiently. So yeah, fixed cost versus variable usage doesn't make much sense economically. And so on-demand fixes this. Also, I think actually subscriptions are quite confusing. Most people will recognize something like this. This is what you often see when you've got to make a decision about a subscription. You get presented with a bunch of tiers: cheap, medium, expensive. Each of the tiers has different benefits. Sometimes you want some of the benefits from all of the tiers and you don't really know exactly what to do. So yeah, they can just be confusing, I think. Also, subscriptions, they sort of lock customers out. Most SaaS providers, I think, find that the majority of the traffic that comes into their platform is actually coming from effectively freemium users who just can't be bothered paying. They're not prepared to take that leap from free to tier 1. So yeah, I think subscriptions sort of tend to lock users out, and yeah, you could potentially extract more revenue from users if you went with on-demand. And subscription fatigue, again, I think this is something that I personally feel like I don't want to pay for more subscriptions. I think the average person has 10 plus subscriptions these days. We don't need more of them. So I think on-demand fixes this. Okay, right, I'm going to move on now to how off-chain payments work. I'm not going to go into too much detail. And the answer, basically, I mentioned them before, payment channels. I guess that there are also things like state channels, which are effectively generalizations of payment channels to arbitrary computational state on the ledger. So when I'm talking to people about what payment channels are, and they have no awareness of blockchains, really, I try and describe it in this way. So in a Web 2 world, I guess, yeah, without payment channels, if you wanted to make a deposit with someone, you've got to trust that person that you're making the deposit with, or you've got to trust someone at least. And in a Web 3 world, with payment channels, effectively you can make deposits into systems without actually having to trust the system that you're depositing to. And that's sort of what's happening with DALI is people are depositing funds into a system, the DALI system, without actually having to trust that DALI aren't going to run off and, spend it on something stupid. I guess in lower level detail, payment channels, basically 2 of 2 multi-sig accounts with a sprinkling of settle delay logic. So the settle delay logic responsible for controlling when money gets settled after the channel is closed. And so what happens when you use a channel, 2 parties, they're going to lock funds on chain inside a payment channel. They're going to then exchange balance updates off chain. So these are the off chain transactions that take place. And the key thing is that this can happen arbitrarily many times. So it has this effect of sort of infinite scalability off chain. And then you settle the updated balance on chain. So yeah, the overall effect is you reduce arbitrarily many transactions into basically 2, 1 for opening, 1 for settling. Yeah, obvious technologies that are using payment channels, Bitcoin Lightning Network, it's not a surprise. Raiden, again, built on Ethereum. Why are they using payment channels? For trust minimized off-chain payments. It allows them to scale the system more effectively. Another way that I sometimes describe what it is that DALI does is we are a payment channel management service, sort of. We manage payment channels for people. So yeah, we've got API users. These guys create payment channels. They then create claims against the channel. They send them to DALI along with the request, the API request. They'll do this multiple times. DALI will take the claims at the end of the day, settle on chain, pay out to the API providers. So yeah, that's what's going on. Why? Because payment channel, because it's faster. It's way cheaper. We can avoid ledger fees completely. It allows us to support way more users, as I sort of mentioned, effectively infinitely many. In the case of XRPL or Zahao, it allows us to take 1,500 transactions a second to basically infinite. Okay, so I'm actually coming to the end of this now. So I think that the blockchain ecosystem, from my own perspective, it's moved on quite a lot over the years. And I think one of the key things that's changed is this doesn't happen anymore. You know, in forums and online, this was pretty common. You know, whenever people argued all the time about whose chain was the best, whose chain was more decentralized, and which other chain. Yeah, so I think this sort of debate doesn't really happen quite so much anymore. I think that's probably a good thing. I actually think that centralization as a concept is very nuanced. It's not clearly defined. So yeah, it sort of doesn't make much sense to have lengthy debates about things that are difficult to grasp, maybe, or maybe it does. I don't know. And actually, some of the most successful blockchain products, they introduce elements of centralization into the system. I think Polymarket's a good example. Betting marketplace or prediction marketplace, they like to be referred as, I think. They're built on top of Ethereum, and they introduce some elements of centralization for market resolution. Stablecoins, again, stablecoins are massive these days. I think it's touted by A16Z recently as having really hit product market fit, processing hundreds of billions of dollars in payments daily. I think it might be more than that. They get issued on multiple blockchains. There is an element of centralization in them. Reserves are being centralized. You know, there is typically a company involved in protecting reserves that back the issued tokens. All KEXs, yeah, they're effectively built on blockchains. They're centralized by definition. KEXs are a really popular product. They capture the majority of trading revenue. And you could argue that DALI introduces elements of centralization. This one is maybe a little bit more tenuous, but we do to some extent centralize liquidity inside payment channels. Also, as I mentioned before, API providers, they effectively trust us on a 24-hour basis to pay out to them. So yeah, you could argue that there are elements of centralization in DALI. And why? Well, I think we do it for a reason. It's for performance. It's for improved efficiency. It enables vastly higher throughputs of API requests. And I think for those reasons, that's why I think a little less decentralization, a little more transaction. So, thanks. So, what's the time now?
Yeah. So we have you're ahead, so we can trouble you with some questions. So
Yeah. You wanna ask any questions?
I have a question. Now you presume that these. Okay. Sorry, you're on. So we presume that the companies were subscribing to your service.
The API providers, you mean?
Yeah. So they would want to get paid in fiat.
They would potentially.
Typically, because we're not here to change their business models. Per se. So, and you said you settle in 24. Batch it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
How would it even work with volatile currencies? So, wouldn't it demand that the users also pay you in stable coins? Otherwise, you're taking the risk of. Yeah,
well, I think so. Yeah, if an API provider wants to accept, an issued token like a USDC or something similar, I think if DALI wants to have no risk in the game,
Yes.
they would have to force API users to pay in USDC using USDC-based payment channels, I think.
Because otherwise you'd get...
Yeah, exactly. We just expose ourselves to loads of
Massive.
risk. Yeah.
You have upsides, but you also
Alternatively, we could, I guess, crank up our charges, to account for the risk that we're taking in the transaction. But I don't really like that idea. I think I prefer to just enable the user to pay with a stablecoin. Yeah.
Thanks.
One more question. For the record.
If subscription, for the video. Sorry. If subscriptions ever came to Zaha or the XRPL, would you see DALI Pay adopting that and maybe becoming like a subscription provider as well? Or what are your thoughts on that?
I think so. Yeah. Like, if there was any opportunity for us to increase traffic through our platform, and that meant going with subscriptions, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Cool.
No issues with that. Yeah.
Microphone. My question is, you have payment channels towards your API consumers, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Why don't you have payment channels towards your API providers? Because then you wouldn't need to settle every 24 hours, but you could settle immediately.
Well, I mean, then we'd have to have our own capital reserve, I think, locked up across lots of different payment channels for each of the API providers. So we'd be locking.
A dozen or so.
Pardon?
You have a dozen or so providers, but you have hundreds or thousands or millions of.
I wish we had millions.
Users.
I wish we had millions. Yeah, we're not quite there yet.
You will.
I guess you're right. Yeah, if there's a big disparity between API users and API providers in the count. Yeah, we could lock funds up on chain in payment channels for the provider as well, and really pull away all of the trust in the system that'd be possible.
So it's more of a reserve thing, and
ultimately, we have to. It means we have to lock up reserves. I mean, honestly, the DALI wallet is not actually doing much with the XRP that it has, so we could do that. Yeah. Just lock up some funds in payment channels and pay out via the payment channel. But sorry, I realize actually as well, that would mean that the API provider would have to have a system for settling the claims that we're sending them. So we'd have to extend the system as well a little bit. It wouldn't be quite as trivial, but I don't think it's not impossible.
Maybe something that they want to have as a choice or something.
Yeah,
not as the only option, I guess.
Yeah. It's doable, I think. Yeah.
I've got another one. Also, you get the API calls and responses through your system, right? It's not just that you provide a header and the API provider then does something with it, but you actually get to see what people are querying and what the response is.
We ultimately, there's some truth to that. Yeah.
Okay, so you're man in the middle.
The request is exposed to us. Yeah, that is true. The headers are more obviously observable. I mean, we are inspecting the headers because we're checking payment claims.
But you're able to also see the content.
Yeah, but we aren't actually doing that.
Yeah.
but your point is valid though. Yeah.
I guess that's a concept the entire web is pretty much used to by now, because 95% of the internet is going through Cloudflare.
Yeah, you're kind of doing more or less like Cloudflare.
Yeah.
On a different way, not for DDoS protection, but for payments. But yeah.
I mean, of course, like there could be some sort of negotiation away from DALI that involves encrypting the body of the request, and then DALI wouldn't be able to see it.
Because I assumed you would be more like an, I don't know, OpenID provider or something, where you say, okay, you register your payment somewhere over there, and then the API calls and so on go on a completely different route where it's just authorized by the payment or something like that.
Okay. I mean, we can have a chat about that if you want. Yeah.
I can share my perspective. I mean, we're using their services, right? And I think anyone in this room, and a lot of developers outside of this room, could develop their own solution for this using basically the same technology and building it on a payment channel directly to them, etc., etc. I think this is like a convenience thing. People take their existing APIs, they don't have to modify anything, and they just put DALL-E in front, and they're done. I think in more complex scenarios, DALL-E would be a solution provider, basically for your own implementation. You could help the user set up, like the wallet concept, right? You can help people set up the payment channel. You can help people top up, view their usage. You can maybe find a way to settle for the API provider, in which case you're just providing the services around managing the entire payment concept. But the current concept is actually just very easy to put in front of what you already have without knowing anything about this stuff. And I think as a trade-off, that does mean that everything goes through their platform, which I guess the people who aren't going to build it themselves don't care about.
I don't think the user cares that much either. They don't even know what's
No, and especially if it's blockchain-based data. If you really want to, I mean, it's already public data anyway, and you can already verify if it's true, right? If you want to. So, but yeah, if there's sensitive data involved, then this could be tricky also on a contract, on a service basis, on a compliance basis, on many different ways.
But I think you can compare it to a lot of software as a service providers, where you have a branded pricing tier and you have an enterprise tier where you can get your own domain or your own in the future.
So yeah, we could sort of extend what we're doing to be, I think it's maybe what you're alluding to, be to like an on-prem type solution or something.
Yeah, or an SDK, right? If you have I think almost all the projects in this ecosystem are either served by Express or by or going through Nginx or something. If there's a plugin on a library or server basis, then
there's obviously a bunch of infrastructure as well that supports DALL-E. I don't know if like that'd mean SDK alone is inappropriate. I don't know. Yeah.
Use as an endpoint, not a proxy instead. Because it sounds like you're more like a proxy, like you go through you. Could you be used as like an endpoint as well? So the person you're paying, instead of being proxied via, they could send it to you.
And we provide the end API as well, effectively. So
you become like a payment provider, nearly like a payment settler. So instead of having to go through you, and like you say, the trust involves the proxy going through you, and like I say, I expect you use Cloudflare and stuff. So instead of having you as a reliant on you going through you, you'd then become like the endpoint. So they would.
So that the API provider hits us to get clarification that payment.
The API provider just hits you after going to them. So say they could then have like some things don't need to be paid, but this thing does need to be paid. So that gets sent to you as a collection point as such.
Potentially, yeah. We can talk afterwards.
You may have a lot of talks.
Yeah.
So in fact, I mean, correct me. So there is a potential that you're actually like a signaling here, right?
Currently, or in the scenario that
in one of the other scenarios.
Yeah. Potentially, yeah. And we're sort of pinged.
Yeah, you're pinged.
Yeah. I'll think about it. Yeah.
What kind of when you're collecting these payments, what kind of licenses do you require? What kind of licenses does DALL-E require?
Well, we don't have any licenses at the moment.
No, would it require in a production?
Well, I think we potentially just need a payment service provider license.
In general, wouldn't it be enough with a payment initiator license?
I don't know. You're the lawyer.
That's right. I mean, from where I understood, I mean, taking into account there are different types. Payment institution as such is much more complex than a mere payment initiator license.
Yeah.
But you should talk to a lawyer in depth. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that the one that you need is payment initiator, which is very light touch for the time being. But anyway, of course, there are nuances and reality is very complex, so you have to assess that. But I think that you could opt for the less complex license.
Yeah. Okay.
We can discuss later.
We can, payment initiator license. Yeah. Any more questions?
I think. Thank you. Thanks.